Welcome to the Mama's Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here.
Mama's Well.
Yes, she is. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Mama's Well podcast. I'm glad you could join us. For those of you who are new to the Mama's Well podcast, this is a place for mamas and daddies to fill up so that we might spill over, because we can't give what we don't have. We know that, right? So whether you're a foster mom, an adoptive mom, a mom to biological kiddos, young or old, whether you work full-time, part-time, or any combination, you know what? Being a mom is probably one of the most impactful things that we do. And so an effort to do that well, I've had to do a lot of digging in myself and a lot of searching. And so parenting shows me those areas that I need to focus in on and to work on. I have my own healing to do and my own discovery, and all of those things affect my parenting. And so that's what this is for. This is an opportunity to dig in and to learn from each other and to practice compassion. So if that's the journey you're on, welcome. Today, speaking of our own trauma, the things that we've gone through, we've all experienced trauma. We've all gone through hard things. Some trauma is, what they say, big T trauma and then little t trauma, but it's all traumatic. And how we process it and how we deal with it is important. And ignoring it is never wise. So today's guest, I'm super excited about. She has a really powerful story. And to start, I want to just say that some of the details of her story that she may or may not share today I would not be appropriate for children. So if your children normally listen in with you, or you're in the car, you might want to save this one for another time or put in some headphones. My guest today, she has gone through some really tough things, but she's chosen to rise up and to heal and to grow. And you're going to find that it's really beautiful. And I don't want to take away part of her story by letting the cat out of the bag too soon, but she has taken some of the brokenness in her life and seen the beauty. So welcome, Alexis Taylor.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
That was a long introduction, wasn't it?
It was, but it was good. It was good.
I'm so honored to be here, and honestly nervous, because anytime I know that the topic is going to be one that's really tender, I feel scared. I don't want to. I always want to make sure that I honor you in telling of your story. So would you just kind of introduce yourself to the audience and just give us a little bit of background before you get started?
Yeah. So I'm almost 27,
okay,
and I've had 2 kids. Every time someone asks me to describe myself, I'm a mom. It's my whole life. It's all I care about. My daughter is 4, and I just started a new company at home. So now I'm home with her more often, and life is changing quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're 27. I know so little about your story, but other than you are, I knew that. I knew you were a mother. Mm-hmm. Take us back to let's just kind of start where, before you became a mother, you were growing up in a home. Did you grow up in this area, or tell me a little bit about how you grew up?
Yeah, so I grew up in the north.
Okay.
With a single mom.
Okay.
She met my dad when I was around Cammie's age, so 3 or 4. They ended up getting married when I was 7.
Okay.
And so we lived in Ohio. Grew up Christian household, super family oriented, and then my dad got a job here in Texas in 2008.
Okay.
So
this is was your stepdad?
My stepdad.
Okay, because
yeah.
you said your mom was.
I don't know my real dad.
Okay.
So he's dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got
He
it.
adopted me after they got married and gave me his last name.
Okay.
So
All
pretty
right.
cool. But yeah, we moved here in 2008, just dad and I, until the house sold, and then the whole family moved down.
So you already started, your story for what you just said kind of started for you when you were 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But obviously before that, because you don't know your dad, there was you've already experienced some trauma in your life.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, anytime a dad's not there, there's something missing, right? It's a piece of the story.
Yeah, you don't really, I mean, I never really thought about it because I had such a good male figure come and step in and take care of us. And so he was a great role model, and I never to this day really asked questions about my real biological dad. But yeah, as time went on and things have happened, I look back, and now that my daughter, because her dad is not around as well, and the questions have started coming in, and why is he not here? And I'm like, maybe I should have asked more questions when I was younger, and maybe I wouldn't have made some of the decisions I made. Like it did have an impact, and I didn't really realize that until probably within the last year or two.
Yeah, I think you're right, because you don't know this about me, but I have a similar story in that I didn't ask a whole lot of questions about my biological father. I was raised by my stepfather from the time I was 2, and I think you're right. I think it does impact how we see ourselves, whether we know a story, whether we have a story that goes with it or not. It does. So, but that's not even the piece that we started with, huh?
No.
Oh, but that's interesting to think about. And I think that's a good line of thinking, is these things do impact our lives, even if we tell ourselves they don't. Yeah.
The smallest of things.
Yeah. Okay. So you get your mom gets married. You're 3 or 4 years old, and take us from there.
So yeah, my dad and I, like I said, moved here in 2008. He was a counselor at the Woodlands High School, and so I started off freshman year with no mom because she was still up north, and just my dad who worked at the school. And I played volleyball my freshman year, and then ran track. And so all of high school was really all about sports for me. And I didn't really fit in right away because I'm from the north, and so Texas is a totally different country from where I'm from. It's totally different. So I had to learn my ways here, but I definitely got rooted into sports, and that's where all my friends and basically now family came from, was just sports.
Wow.
So yeah.
So you still have some of those same friends?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, it's I ran track. So I played volleyball my freshman year, and then I decided to stick with track because at the Woodlands you kind of had to pick. I was.
Yeah.
I used to be.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure. But yeah, so I just dove into track, and then, you're dying every day on the track, and they kind of become family because no one else is doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So your mom's, when does your mom end up moving back here?
I think they ended up back here the end of my freshman year.
Okay.
I mean, they came and visited a lot,
Okay.
obviously, but I think they were officially here almost a year after
Okay.
we
Well,
moved
tell
here.
us more. Keep going with the story.
Yeah. So I was getting recruited to run track in college, and it was my senior year, so I was 17. And we had just had a huge track meet, and I had won all my races and qualified for regionals, and it was like a big deal. So I decided I was going to go have a pizza party with my friends because I was super innocent in high school. I really didn't get into any trouble and do anything, no partying. So I went to go pick up drinks at McDonald's and woke up the next day in a completely different part of town in my car, no clothes on, and had realized that I had been raped.
Wow.
Yeah, it was tough.
So you went to McDonald's to get drinks.
Waters.
And were you drugged?
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the water, you think the person or you don't know?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I woke up in a neighborhood familiar to someone I knew, but I don't know if it was that person. And I don't remember anything after the McDonald's, which is a blessing and a curse. You hear a lot of stories about girls that have very traumatic rape stories, and I'm like, I don't remember anything. I knew what had happened based off what I woke up in, but I don't remember.
Where was your car?
It was in a cul-de-sac.
Okay.
Parked, keys still in the ignition.
Wow.
weed all over the car, and I had never even smoked weed before in my life.
Wow.
And yeah, I didn't have pants on, so
Oh.
it was tough. And I
Yeah.
woke up in the back seat, so
Yeah. Okay.
wasn't the best experience.
No.
But like I said, I don't really remember. I think I know who it was,
Yeah.
but I don't really remember the details.
Yeah. So obviously there were no charges pressed or anything
No,
like
I
that.
didn't tell anyone until a year later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to say that in a way that I ran track, and so we were doing really well that year, and like I was known at our school and in the Woodlands area for just like our relay team and stuff was really good.
Yeah.
And like my parents were super proud of me, and I was going to college for track, and I had all these big schools looking at me, and so like I didn't want to bring the attention, like I didn't want to bring negative attention to our family.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily, like, I don't really remember feeling a lot of shame. I kind of honestly just tucked it in the back and was like, we've got regionals and state coming up. Like, I don't remember it, so it's okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then after I started college, I went to Texas State to run track. God bless me with who is still my best friend now, my college roommate. And she was super like biblical and like in bed at 8 o'clock and like super
Wow.
straight, right? And I was like, I mean, the rape obviously affected me in ways I didn't know until I got to college. And I just started partying and like sleeping around. And so she kind of was like trying to reel me back in. She's like, we've got practice in the morning. Like, what are you doing? You know? So she would pray for me every night and without me knowing. And then her and I had a conversation one day, and we were just reading scripture together, and I don't remember the exact scripture, but I just like took a shower that night and was like, I have to tell my parents. Like, I have to. But I was too, I don't know if ashamed is the right word. I was like scared to tell them because I hadn't told them for a year.
Yeah.
So I just sent them a really long email.
And you had told your friend.
I didn't.
Oh, you hadn't told your, so you were
No,
okay.
I hadn't told
So
a
this
single
was all on
person.
your own. It wasn't your friend's prompting to tell your
Right.
parents.
It
Okay.
was just our conversation made me realize like maybe I do need help and I do
Yeah.
need to tell someone something, you
Right.
know? So obviously my parents were the first people because I had a very good support system. And so, yeah, I just sent them a really long email, and the next day they were up there and we
Yeah.
sat and talked, and I never told her until like, I don't even remember. It might have been years later. And to this day, like every time we talk about it, she's like, I did not know, like it was that bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was the reason that I told them, which I say was the start to my healing, but it was also the start to an unraveling of events.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
So
That was tough. You just
I'm
said
good.
some big stuff.
Okay.
Thank you for
It's a
the
lot.
vulnerability that it takes to
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so an unraveling.
Yes. So once I got it off my chest, it's like, all right, it's out there, and I refused to be a victim. So I just started sleeping around and doing things because I didn't want my rapist to win, and I didn't want him to ruin like my view on sex and relationships and, you know, moving forward in life. But really I was creating this like bigger thing in my head, and I didn't need to sleep with every person I dated or spoke to, or, you know, I don't remember there being a fear there, but it was like, I can't let him win. So like, I just went down a rabbit hole I shouldn't have gone down, which affected my school and it affected my track. So I ended up getting kicked off my track team my freshman year because my grades weren't up to par and I just wasn't in it mentally. They could tell, like when they recruited me, they would always tell me, when we recruited you, you had so much heart and you were so excited, and now you're just like numb. I'm like, if only you knew.
You just said I was numb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If only they knew,
Did
like,
they use
why.
that word?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I was. I mean, to this day, I still struggle with feeling when it comes to certain situations. I'm just kind of been going through life numb.
Yeah.
Obviously, now it's easier and I can spot it and change certain situations, but it's still something I struggle with, that word. But yeah, so I ended up getting kicked off the track team. And so I finished the semester there and was kind of deciding, like, do I go back and just not run, or do I transfer to another school and run? and I just loved track so much, and it was the only thing that kind of got me through the rape and any difficulty, and I just loved, that was my whole life was sports. So I ended up deciding, okay, I want to keep running, but where? Because I don't really want to go back to a big school. It just was too much for me. And so Colorado's kind of our family's second home. Like, we go up there every summer my whole life. That's just been our thing. So we were looking at schools there, and I found a really tiny school up in the mountains. And I thought, this is going to be so fun. Like, it's in the mountains. It's my favorite thing. And just, like, super tiny town. So I'm literally just going to be running track and camping and hiking. Like, it really couldn't get any better. And it was horrible. Horrible. I started dating a guy I met on my recruitment trip. He was from Texas as well, so we kind of bonded, and we would keep in touch, like texting and social media. And then once I got up there, we started dating. And yeah, it was just very toxic and unhealthy, and it turned into very abusive. And it was like the darkest time of my life.
Wow.
It was horrible.
Wow. And you're sitting here thinking to myself, like, just when things go unsaid, when things go unacknowledged, like, we get numb.
Yeah.
And we just escape.
Right.
And we numb. You felt numb, but then you're doing things to numb. You know what I mean? Like, perpetuating the numbness.
Exactly.
Man. Okay. So toxic relationship, abusive relationship. How was the running going at that point?
It was going. It wasn't the best. It took me a solid year to get acclimated, because it's like the highest track in the country.
Wow.
So it took me a while. Like, my times were not the same.
Yeah.
But
I guess they kind of expect that, right?
They do.
You're coming from Texas, and then, okay.
But yeah, track was never the same after I left. My times were never the same. My heart, I loved it, but I was embarrassed and ashamed, just like upset with myself on how I handled everything. And then when I got there, I was like, all right, it's kind of a fresh start. And then it was upsetting because you're trying to run, you can't breathe. And I'm like, had all this pressure because I was coming from a D1 school, and they were expecting a lot from me. And it was just a lot of pressure in that front. And then behind the scenes was like, I didn't have my family. We were 4 hours away from the closest airport, and if it snowed, you were stuck because you had to get over a mountain pass. So I literally was thousands of miles away from my family. The only person I had was this man who just completely crushed me.
Yeah.
So
how was your family? Were you, at that point, were you communicating with your family much, or were you kind of shutting them out as well?
No, I still communicated, but that's a really good question. I don't really remember exactly how it was. We did communicate, and they'd try to come up, but literally it would snow every time we'd try to go, like, in the middle of May. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
So I didn't get to interact as much in person, which I think I needed more. But yeah, I didn't tell them a lot until a little later. There were times I'd call and be like, he's mad tonight, I don't know what to do, like, blah, blah, blah. But
so they knew about this relationship.
They did, but they didn't realize how dark it was. And then he was a very broken individual. So, my parents are foster parents, and I've always been taking people in. I'd always bring friends home that needed help. That was just kind of 90% of the kids they helped were because I brought them home.
It's so ironic, because I know your parents, and I know that that is a big part of their heart.
Yeah.
And that you were hurting so badly, and they probably felt really helpless.
Yeah.
In trying to help you.
Yeah. He ended up getting super close with them because my dad is a counselor, and they just know how to handle those type of people. And so I always would make excuses because I'm like, oh, he's part of the family now, and like I know his life, so he hit me tonight and got super drunk and did this, but it's because he's hurting, or and there was a family situation on his side one night, which was kind of we'd break up and get back together, and then break up and get back together. It was just like an endless cycle for 3 years. And but my last straw was he had a family issue, and he got super hammered and just beat the crap out of me, threw me down a flight of stairs. His whole, all of his roommates had to break down the door to come in and get me. And there was a party going on at the house that night, so everyone saw what happened. And then the next day at school, everyone's like, you're a liar, that never happened. And I had to walk from his house to my friend's house across campus in 2 feet of snow with no clothes on, bleeding, and they had to help clean me up. And it was just a horrible night. And so I ended up getting a no contact order through the school, and he didn't follow it. He could have cared less about it. My coaches didn't care about it. For example, we weren't allowed to sit together on the bus on the way to track meets because he was also on the track team. We weren't allowed to be on the same floor in the hotel rooms. Like, there was very strict rules to keep me safe. And my coaches would sit me next to him on the bus, would put his room right across from mine at the hotel. And when I would go confront them, like, I need help. They'd be like, you're never going to learn. You're never going to be able to grow as a person if you don't face these things head on. I'm like,
Wow.
but what you're not realizing is what's happening because we sat next to each other on the bus, and because he can see who's coming in and out, like, just teammates.
Yeah.
But there's a guy teammate that says hi to me at the hotel. I have to deal with that when I get home.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
So it was...
So powerlessness.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I could talk for hours on this one topic,
Yeah.
but I think that really broke me. That's where, I mean, I was raped, and I felt worse dealing with this than I did that. And it destroyed me for a very long time. I still struggle. Some people that reach out from those times apologizing now that we're all, like, grown up. Mm-hmm. I just am so... I don't have hate in my heart for anyone, but it's very hard to, like, even see their name on my phone.
Yeah.
Just because there was so much going on and so many people knew, and no one helped me because he was popular and fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just really hard, and I ended up trying to get a restraining order against him, but, like, we weren't set up. It was a whole thing, and it ended up falling through because we weren't prepared legally on our side. And, yeah, he brought the whole football team, track team. He brought everyone to court that day, and they all had a party, and the whole school. You know, there's only 2,500 of us, and they all were just hating on me. And I'd show up to practice with a black eye, and my coach would be like, you need to go cover that up. We don't want attention. You're bringing the wrong attention. So it was like no support whatsoever. And then
Did you have were you on a scholarship?
Mm-hmm.
But they kept you on the team.
They did.
Yeah.
Until the end, where they didn't. And that happened, you know, there was a lot of drama. It was always, oh, Alexis is involved in drama. Mm-hmm. And I mean, obviously, I was not in a good spot. So there were many times where I was, like, I look back now and I'm like, what were you doing? Like, the lies I would spread or make up, or because it was like no one was believing me, so I had to tell these lies to, like, get their attention, and then they'd finally get my attention, but then they'd find out it was a lie. So then what I really needed help with is now, like, oh, she's probably lying.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of mistakes that I made, you know?
Yeah, I feel for you. Like,
yeah. It was bad, but so I was always involved in something. And even if I didn't, even when I'm like, all right, I broke up with him, I'm not going to talk to him anymore, I'm safe now, I'm out of the house, like, everything's good, I'd get pulled into something else, you know, because he would stir something else up with someone else. And so it was just like so many meetings in my coach's office. And so they were finally just like, we're fed up. And I'm like, I'm fed up. I'm fed up. No one's protecting me. No one's helping me. My mom had flown out a couple times, met with the coach. No one helped me. So it was kind of like a mutual agreement on that one.
Yeah.
Because I was going to quit anyways, and they were like, we're done dealing with this.
I just can't help but, you know, well, I want to keep going. I want to keep going this story, because even though, you know, this is a heartbreaking story.
It's,
I know. Just let's keep going. Let's keep going with this story. Wow.
So that also broke me because the assistant coach was the one that was going to court with me, and, like, she had had a similar situation in her past with a man, and, like, she knew what I was going through, and she just left me out to dry, like. And so seeing, like, okay, I'm already struggling with so many other things, and then now the abuse, and now more trauma. I don't have my family, and I have these two coaches that are adults that I can lean on, who are like, I mean, your coaches are your parents when you're in college.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're so far, like, all of us are so far away from our families up in the mountains. So those were our people. And, like, everyone just abandoned me.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of issues from that. And so once I was off the team there. I finished that semester, and I just was like, okay, now I'm going to a third college because I couldn't stay there. I mean, I was sleeping with a knife under my pillow. I lived with guys after I moved out. I lived with other teammates that did not like him, so I knew I was safe. Every time he'd break in, he could never get to my room because they'd stop him. But it was just like, I'm living in fear for what? I'm off the team now. Why am I still here? But so I ended up transferring to my last school in Colorado, where I met my daughter's dad, which shouldn't have been dating, but I was, hopping out of, I mean, we had been broken up for a long time, but it was still like the back and forth, the toxicity. So I met this guy who I did not like, in not a bad way. I just didn't, like, it wouldn't have been who I would normally pick. Yeah. But I was like, oh, he comes from a Christian family, and like, I need to try to date a good guy. Yeah. So I started dating him. And it just didn't work, so we broke up. Everything was fine. And then 5 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. Wow. With my daughter, which was really
Were you
upsetting.
running track at this point?
I was,
Okay.
and it was tricky because I transferred there to run, and my old coach was like, watch out for her. Like, she's going to cause you problems. She's going to cause you problems. And he was like, no, she won't. Like, because he kind of knew some of my story, because I had a couple friends had gone there. They had left the school because of how toxic it was, and they transferred there. So he knew some of my story, and he's like, she's not going to be a problem. So he stood up for me and fought. And it was going really well. And then the workout started, me in the front, and then I was in the back. And I could not breathe. I couldn't keep up. I'm like, why? What is happening? And then my best friend was like, I think you might be pregnant. I'm like, what? Wow. So I went and took some tests, found out I was pregnant. And then I had to go tell the coach, who just put his head on the platter for me, and a chopping block for me, and it was really just another tough time, embarrassing, and that was kind of another fresh start, and finally safe in a way, and like I knew what I needed to do. I knew I needed to graduate, and I had a whole plan set up, and was like actually excited and had the freedom to do it, and then found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are you thinking, did you tell your parents?
I did. Next week, so I found out I was pregnant, and a week later was spring break. So my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, at the time, I told him before I told them, and then we were both going to go home, and they were going to meet him and stuff, because we were trying to figure out, like, should we get back together? What do we do? And so he ended up not coming with me. But yeah, I called them and told them. So I went home, and that spring break we told my brothers, which was also hard. And kind of came up with a plan for the future. Finish the semester and move back home. I needed a plan. Or else. But never once did it cross my mind to abort with her. It was kind of just, all right, now I'm about to be a mom. I mean, it was hard because I had to give up track. Normally you graduate, the end is coming, you can prepare, and I still had 2 years of eligibility to run, so it just being cut off, and I could never go back to competing, was really hard for me.
Yeah. And this really, like, do you feel like, so let's talk about that plan. So the plan was you come home, right? And then how involved were your parents at that time? I mean, like, who were you leaning on at that point? I mean, you left the coach, you had obviously started developing this relationship with this coach. The guy, you've already told us this, this is not the guy, but you're willing to ponder that he's part of the plan, right? So what do you do? Who do you lean on? I mean, how old are you at this point?
I was 21. Okay. I did not have anyone other than my family. I had a best friend. I had one best friend, honestly. That's who I leaned on the hardest, I guess, during that time.
The one that was from Texas State, or no?
No. Okay. I had them too, but again, I'm in Colorado. They're all in Texas. No, I had a best friend I had made when I had first moved out to Colorado, and we transferred together. Okay. So we both went to the new school to run. Okay. And she knew everything, so she was who I leaned on. And so, that's really all I had was them. And this new place didn't have, I had just moved there. So I didn't really get involved in church and all of that there. So I really didn't have anyone. Yeah. And a lot of people knew I was coming from drama, and my daughter's dad was star football player. And so once we broke up, I kind of lost any friends I had because they were his friends. I hadn't really established myself there yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's just, you just kind of go back and you can just kind of trace this, when you're just looking up from this way, I could see all along the people, calling you drama and this and that. And I can imagine you were wearing some of those labels, feeling that, and then I would, just, you said you didn't know if it was shame you experienced, but I can pretty much guarantee you were wearing some shame.
Yeah. At that point, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. But probably that seed was planted when you chose not to tell anybody that when you woke up in the car.
100%.
That was shame.
Yeah.
So shame is awful.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's not something I know from me and my shame that I struggle with. It doesn't go away. I want it to go away. But it's something I have to always fight,
Yeah.
Well, and it gets a little bit, I become more aware of it. So I can recognize it and call it what it is more quickly. But, okay. So, I know that all of this is leading, I know because I know where you're at right at this point in time that you did create a plan. So let's talk at this point. You move home.
Well, before I moved home, I had to
okay.
come back from spring break and meet with him and tell him my plan.
Okay.
He did not like my plan.
Okay.
And so I was basically told, you're either going to stay here with me while I date other people.
Oh, wow.
And have the baby, or you're going to move home and it's not my baby. I was like, well, I guess it's not your baby then. And that was the last. He left me in the restaurant by myself, and that was the last conversation we ever had.
That's the last conversation you've ever had.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, there were a couple texts, a couple weeks after, death threats from his parents to my parents. But nothing, no real conversation.
Was he abusive as well?
No.
But kind of sounds emotionally abusive in that way. This is it, or
afterwards, yes. And I found out a lot about him after we broke up, which was a blessing in my mind because I was like, thank God I didn't have to go through more trauma with someone. Yeah. But I guess it did cause a little bit more trauma because you find out who, he was not who I thought he was. But it's been tough because it's a blessing that he's not around because I would not want that family or situation around my child. So it's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So you move home.
So I moved home, tried to finish college online, but that was a whole issue in itself. Had Cammie in November that following year, 2016. I was 22 at that point, working in school, single mom, lived with my parents for a year and a half. And then at 6 months, a couple months after I had her, I started hanging back out with old friends from Texas. Some good, not that the others were bad, but they weren't, I was progressing. My whole pregnancy was changing all of my life, cutting off any toxic people, getting rid of bad patterns, bad habits. So I had made a lot of progress from where I was when I first found out to where I was when I had her. But you still, you're lonely. I'm lonely.
Yeah. And
my parents are very helpful, but they're also, tough love. So you're going to live in her house, which is fine, and we'll help you with her. But she's up in the middle of the night crying. That's your baby, you know? So there were nights where I just if only I had him here, not him specifically, but somebody. A dad,
a partner.
And so you get lonely. So I started hanging out with the wrong crowd, and just kind of not partying, but going out more and doing things and just trying to feel like myself again. Which I think a lot of moms probably can relate to after you have kids. You're like, what?
I can relate.
Yeah, right. So, and so I ended up finding out at 6 months that I was pregnant with my second.
So you were 6 months pregnant before you found out?
No.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I didn't word that correctly.
It's okay. Say it.
Cammie was 6 months old. Yeah.
Wow.
And I found out that I was pregnant which I had maybe like 2 periods after I had her. So like it wasn't even in my head, you know? And then I found out and was like terrified. I was so mad at myself.
Yeah.
I did not handle it properly the night that he was with me, the dad, when we found out, and he was like so excited. And I was just like, this is horrible. Like, what are my parents going to say?
Yeah.
And they were out of town at the time. So like I had to call again and be like, guess what? Round 2. But I can go into that if you. It's a lot.
Yeah, you're not a lot.
Thank you. I felt that for a very long time. Yeah. I still struggle with it now. But I think now that I'm involved in church and stuff, it's a little easier to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm okay. So you call your parents.
Well, so before I called my parents, it was, do I abort and they'll never know and no one will ever know? Or do I tell them and they help me figure out a plan? And I'm going to cry. I loved my daughter so much, and I had made so much progress that once I found out I was pregnant, it was like, I say the word terrified because I was terrified, not terrified to tell people or terrified to tell my parents. It was more like I just failed my kid. You know, I had just made all this progress for her, and then one night I go out, and it was literally one night that I had done something like that, and I ended up getting pregnant from it, and it was just like so much shame and just heartbreak. I was so heartbroken and literally just disgusted with myself. Like, how could you do this? And to your family, to your kid, like they've taken you in, everyone's helped you, everyone's been so positive. I was in such a positive spot, and I just failed. I failed. And so it was really hard. And then I'm, you know, dealing with someone who isn't a practicing Christian, and, you know, he's just like, oh, we'll just get married and have kids, and like, but I was also already a parent, so like I knew what it took to be a parent.
Yeah.
And we were not ready.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to get married. And I will never marry someone just because we had a kid. That's just, that proved right in the first one. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was really tough for me. So I had to pray a lot and like try to figure out, what do I do? And I had never in my life thought I would ever consider abortion. But I think I was so terrified and ashamed that I was like, I could. It really, I said it to myself, but it never sat like that I would do it. Yeah. But I was like, you could consider it, and then no one would ever know. Yeah. But I couldn't do it.
It's probably good, you know, it's good when we give ourselves a choice. You know what I mean? Like we give ourselves, because honestly, we do have a choice. Right. You know, we always have a choice.
Always, yes.
Even when there's no choice. Right. In our state or wherever, we all know that people can make that choice. Right. So you pondered the choice.
I pondered the choice. I think I sent a text. I did not call this time because I was so horrified that I had to tell them. And they were in Colorado on vacation. So I sent a text, and they were like, please don't make any decision. I didn't say anything about abortion in the text, but I just sent a text that what the situation was, and they're like, don't do anything until we get home. And so I had been looking online and stuff to just read up on abortion, and like, I don't know, it scared me that I was even considering it, because when I found out I was pregnant with Camden, it would never even cross my mind. And so I had done a lot of research and then waited for them to get home, sat and talked with them. And, you know, at the time my mom had worked at an adoption agency, so she was very cautious in how she worded things, because you have to be when someone is in a state of like, do I keep this baby? Do I not? You're panicking. There's shame. There's fear. There's so many different emotions going on at that time. And the mother-daughter dynamic, you know, she's going to tell me what to do. I'm like, no.
I get it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so she knew, like, okay, adoption is an option. I hadn't even really thought about that. But they were both very supportive. But we sat and talked, and I just told them, you know, I think I'm going to go with him and just, like, meet with an abortion clinic just to get information. Not
Yeah.
going to do anything. I just want to meet with someone to
Yeah.
get information. And she's like, okay, but do me a favor and go to PACN first. And that is who I went to with my daughter as well when I first moved back.
That's Pregnancy Assistance
Center North.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a Christian-based ministry. So I had went and did my ultrasound, sat with them. They're like, okay, so are you good? Like, how's it going? I'm like, well, I have an abortion meeting tomorrow. And they were like, what? And so we had a whole talk about it. And they handed me like the little rubber baby of like the size of what your baby is right now. And I was mad. I was so mad because I'm like, you know, I had always been a Christian, but I wasn't really practicing as much in college because of all the stuff I was dealing with. And I just remember holding this little baby, and I'm like, how these are such judgmental Christians. Like, I was getting so frustrated because I'm like, I've been here before. They were great to me before, but before I wasn't in a negative mindset as to my child, you know. And so I just left there really angry, and I went home and prayed some more, prayed with my parents. And the next day, him and I drove to go to this abortion clinic downtown. And on the way there was just so much fighting, and I just wanted to play Christian music. All I wanted was Christian music, and he's like, no, we're not doing this. This is not God, this is you. You're the one making it difficult, you know. And I'm like, okay, because he did not want to abort. And so on the way down there, we got super lost. Like, we were in the woods in Timbuktu. I don't even know where we were, how we got there. So I started laughing. I'm like crying, laughing. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I made him put on the Christian music, and we both started praying. And I was like, I just need a sign. And my whole life, anytime I pray for a sign, God just slaps me in the face because I'm stubborn and don't listen. So he gives me like,
or he's just good to you.
He is.
He just gives you a sign.
But you like look back after and you're like, oh, those were all signs, but I just wasn't paying attention. So I always pray for like a slap in the face, and he does it hard.
So what happened?
So we're
Billboard?
driving out of the woods, and we get on the highway to get home, and I kid you not, like the very first billboard was like adopt in like giant black letters with this little baby. And then almost every single billboard after, I'm like, where are we? Is this like adoption capital? Like, I don't understand. He did not find it amusing. And I was like, what
He
is
didn't find
happening?
it amusing?
No, he was so mad at me.
Because he was mad because he wanted to keep the baby?
Yes.
Okay. So he was mad that y'all were driving to an abortion clinic.
He was mad that I wasn't marrying him and just having the kids and moving on with life. Like, why are you even considering other options? With him and I, though, like, I really don't have to get into it, but it was always just about him and I. It was never about the kids. Like, why can't we get married? Right. And not a bad guy, just not the right guy.
You just knew in your heart this wasn't going to be what,
Right.
So even though you were doing things that were not loving to yourself, there was still this little small voice that was speaking up for you.
Right. But you don't see until after.
I see it.
Well, right. I did not see until after. Those billboards. I got home and was like, Mom. And I just had to tell her. And she's like, so, adoption. Here. And then she then offered.
Did you know your mom was my caseworker at that time?
I did not.
Yeah.
No.
So that was 2007, when, 16, 17?
17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, we might have already moved to another agency, but she was my caseworker in 2015.
I found that out.
And,
yeah. I love hearing that. I always meet people and they tell me that.
Yeah.
It makes me happy.
Okay, so billboard, go home, mom, adoption.
So I tell Mom, she starts giving me adoption options, just like telling me about, like, I grew up with us adopting. I have 2 adoptive siblings and grew up fostering, kinship, like all of that. So like I grew up in it, but I just didn't really consider it. And so her presenting it to me, it like gave me a peace. Like, okay, there are other options. I can either work this out with the dad and maybe keep the baby, or I can do adoption. Like, I don't have to kill the child. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so that gave me a lot of peace.
Yeah, you like.
Yeah, it was like 1,000 pounds lifted off my shoulders. Still obviously really hard, and like I was still mad at myself, but that scary idea was gone. Because it was that question that I had to keep asking myself. Okay, do I abort and live the rest of my life maybe not being able to get pregnant again? Or, you know, all the complications that could come with it physically. And then on top of that, like, have to know that I personally no judgment on other people, but that I like aborted my child. And if I have another one, am I going to carry the guilt that like, you know, is Camden going to grow up and want a little brother or sister, and she had one. Like I had to weigh that with, is that worse, or is having a child and giving it to another family worse?
Yeah. I mean, whatever people's views are on abortion, I don't know that anyone could go through it with any type of awareness. Whether they thought it was right or wrong is insignificant. They would still experience grief.
Exactly. So I had to decide, is that grief, like what grief can I live with, you know? And adoption just had so many options. Like you might not ever see your kid again, but you know they're in a happy, healthy home, or you might be able to have an open and like actually be able to have a relationship. Yeah. So I sat down with mom and her boss and a couple other caseworkers, and they were just telling me, you know, so they gave me a bunch of books. Once I decided, okay, I think this is what I'm going to do, I sat with her boss, the owner, and we went through some books together, and I had picked a family. And I was like, I want this family because my baby's going to be biracial. They were a biracial family. I was like, I need them to be his family. Mm-hmm. And my mom had a different family in mind, but didn't tell me. Okay. And so I had, Kim was the owner, and she said, okay, go home and pray on it. I'm not going to message them until I want you to have 24 hours. Just pray on it. Mm-hmm. Like it was not sticking. So I was like, all right, can I see the books again? And then there was this one family, a white family, and I knew my son would not be, he wouldn't fit in with the family. Yeah. So I was struggling a lot with that. But every like little detail in their book was our family. Like where they went to vacation, what they do. It was literally our family. Yeah. So I was like them.
And
like,
you didn't
instantly
know this. I mean, I'm reading between the lines that this was the family that your mom had in her mind. Yes. But you didn't know that.
I did not know. So, and the other one, it was like, okay, I like the fact that they're like mixed, he's mixed. Like I liked it, but this family I saw and was like, this is it. Like I knew. Yeah. So I ran home. I was like so excited. And I told mom, and she was like, that's exactly who I would have chosen. Like, yes. And she knew them personally because she had been working with them. And they had another little boy in their care at the time, or were getting another one. I don't remember, but she was their caseworker. So yeah, I ended up meeting them. And we've just been like best friends since. It's really cool. Yeah. Wow. I'm going to cry again.
Yeah. So this particular family welcomed you and as the powerfully important role that you played in your son's life. Yes. And you have a relationship. And I know that's really important to you. And I know I'd like to let you talk about that a little bit, because that's something that let me, you can share. I'm just going to introduce it. But through all of this horrific trauma, there is that voice that you said you didn't see, but I have been listening and hearing it. And the voice was, this man's not good for me. I need to get away. You know, I can't abort this child. I need to tell my parents. I mean, throughout your story, you have had this voice rising up in you, fighting against all of the shame that was put on you. Right. And then and so what's happening in your life right now, that your birthday is May 13th, I think, and you're about to launch something, a website, a blog, podcast called Beautifully Broken. Well, you want to tell about that?
Yeah. So my whole life was told, you're broken. You're broken. Every man, any relationship, any friendship, they're like, you're just broken. You're too much. You're broken. And so I heard that forever. And then once I had both my kids and had this amazing story with the adoptive family, and like everything just came to fruition, I'm like, this was a beautiful story. And so I started praying and getting back into church, and I realized, you know, like I was beautifully broken. Like that's just the best way to say it, is through all that all those hard times in dark places, he was always there. He was always there. I was in and out of church and like didn't have a strong foundation with him. But like you're saying, that little voice, he was always there. And just the freakiest things, when I was in those times, I tried taking my life twice when I was in Colorado. And like both times, like the most it was God. And so once I started healing and I looked back at those situations, I'm like, wow, like that was beautiful. And if that wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened. And I love who I am today. Like I can finally say that. I'm going to cry, but I love who I've turned into. And obviously there's a lot of healing that I still need to do. And, parenting has brought up a lot more. But I love who I've turned into and just the progress. Memories come up on social media and I'm like, oh my God, like the person I was then, I don't even know her. And so I just wanted to create a ministry because I'm always sharing on Facebook and I'm a very open book about my life with anyone I meet. Because I don't think for me it's helped with healing just being open. And if it makes someone uncomfortable, I've had to learn to I can't just be like, oh yeah, rape, But for me, just talking about it has really helped me heal. Yeah. And I feel like I've named it Beautifully Broken, Untold Stories, because I feel like everyone has an untold story. And if they're not seeing people going through it, they feel alone and they feel broken. Yeah. And I just want to show people that there's beauty in that brokenness. And, non-believers, believers, God still loves you and there is hope. You can still fix, that's also what's beautiful about being broken is you can put all the pieces back together. And with God's help, you're going to turn into this beautiful person. Yeah.
Well, you already are.
And so
you already were.
Yes, exactly. Were. But you're building the pieces back up how you want them and how they're supposed to be. Yeah. And because you've gone through this, now you know not to do this or what, And so it's just a beautiful process.
You've learned things about yourself and you're continuing to learn things. Right. And you're 27? Yeah. You're about to turn 28?
Yeah. No, I'm almost 27.
Almost 27. So I know because I'm 49 that I'm still doing that. Right. And that that we're all broken. And I always like to, I don't know where this came from. Maybe somebody way smarter than me said it, but this vulnerability and this honesty, and this is the kryptonite of shame. You can still feel the shame, but when you speak it out, it loses its power. Right. Exactly. And so the more you speak out your story and your truth, and I think it's important because that we know every hurt, every bad behavior, every rapist, every girl who sleeps around, every person who has an abortion, all these people have a story. Exactly. And they have a wound, and they are responding to that wound. And I think that's important for us to be aware of, and most importantly, to have compassion for the places in you that still say, I'm too much, or that I'm dirty, or that I'm bad, or that I'm a loser, or whatever all the words that we can say, because they're not true. Yeah. And I know you have one part of this is that you have a really, a real heart for the birth mom and making those hard decisions. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I just, like I said, because I posted my story, I get a lot of messages from older women and young, girls my age or a little younger, that are in very similar situations. Obviously, circumstances are different, but, do I abort? What is adoption like? What are these things like? And so I wanted to create that ministry because it will share other people's stories through the podcast, through the blogs, and it also will share more of my story and what led me to make that decision and how it wasn't easy, but it's so worth it in the end. And I always want to bring light to the birth mom because I feel like there's a very negative light on birth moms. It's always, I don't know how to describe it. It's just most of the time, and I guess the world that I live in, which is foster care and all of that with my parents, the birth parents are pretty rough, or they don't always make the best decisions. And you learn compassion for them, and you learn to be very understanding, and you want them to get better. But you don't normally see a birth mom that's just a normal person at our church or some, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I just want to bring light to that because obviously adoptive parents and families, they get a lot of praise for what they're doing, as they should. But I want the birth moms to get praise too because it's a very selfless and very hard decision.
I think the birth mom, I mean, and we talked about this a little bit. Well, and I just want to reiterate what I just said is that everybody has a story. And I said this earlier today, but we can't, judgment and compassion don't coexist.
No.
So we can't, when we stand in judgment, we're separating ourselves from somebody else.
Right.
Instead of embracing somebody else. And so when you hear your story, like, and I know you've reiterated to me that was the hardest choice you ever made, is to give your son up for adoption. And then the most beautiful blessing that you've received is that this family welcomed you as a part of his life. How is that? Just because I know a lot of these families that are listening, they are asking questions on Facebook groups, support groups of like, how do we navigate the birth family relationship? And it's always different. Obviously, you're not of danger to that child. That was a choice you guys made from the get-go together. So it's always different. But how does it work for you guys? What does he call you? How are y'all gonna? Or do you maybe you don't even know, how old is he now?
He just turned 3 in March.
Okay, so y'all are still probably working out some of these details. Our situation is a little different, obviously, because like you said, I'm not danger to him. We became very close while I was pregnant, and they kind of walked through the whole dad situation. They walked through a lot of my trauma and healing with me. And I think what made me so receptive to them is they were very understanding and very compassionate. And although they had some walls up because, I could have still decided to keep him after birth and all these things, I never once felt judgment from them. I never once felt pity from them. They were just honestly there to love me and take care of my child if that is what I chose. So I think keeping it that simple is helpful. And then once I had him, we were so close that when I gave birth, the hospital gave us conjoined rooms, and they would take him at night. They'd hang out in my room all day, and we were kind of just, going through it together. And like they told me the day, you have 48 hours after you give birth to make a decision. And that was like the hardest 3 days of my life. And but they were so kind and just patient, and like you could tell they were scared that I was gonna keep him. But they were so, no matter what decision I made, they were like there for me. Obviously, if I would have kept him, it probably would have been tough. But I'm saying I just never felt that pressure in the hospital, And so once we signed over, there was still never like a celebration, like let's make her feel uncomfortable. Like I was just comfortable with them the whole time. And then leaving the hospital, we kind of made a plan before I gave birth, and then at the hospital, like what we were going to do moving forward. Obviously, it'll change. I mean, there's so many ways it could change, but we just wanted to have a outline of like, this is what we're going to try to accomplish. And so the goal is and was to just have the kids grow up together and like us be in his life. And if it gets to a point where it's too much for either kid, then we step back and, or either parent.
Correct. But I think what's most important with our relationship is I have a relationship with them. It's not for it is for my son, but like I'm genuinely very close with his mom.
That's wonderful.
And so I think I see her more than I see him. Which I'm perfectly, I'm so happy with that. And I know that he's being so loved, and she's very open with sending me texts or, did something funny today, you should see what it is, and she'll send me it.
What does he call you?
Nothing right now.
Okay.
So as of right now, we're just friends. We put books together. I wrote him a letter. They have the same stuff. My daughter and him have the same stuffed animal. Like we kind of thought out all of it. So once he gets to the age where he starts asking questions, because he is black and they are white, like where did I come from and all these things, then they can be like, Alexis.
So they don't call you birth mom or anything right now?
No, I'm just Alexis and Camden. And so, they'll just explain to him, like, this is her, here's a letter, we have all these things. You and Cammy have the same stuffed animal, But I was very big on asking them, like, I don't care how this looks. If I'm not around, that is fine. My daughter needs to know him. And so they know who each other are. But they don't know who they are to each other.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that'd be confusing for them.
Yeah. So we're both, like, I understand. I cannot walk up and be like, hi, I'm your mom.
Yeah.
And I think that's big for a lot of birth parents.
Yeah.
Because his dad has never met him, and still struggles with that. And, you know, there were a couple times where they almost met. And he's like, well, I'm going to walk up and tell him that I love him and that, you know, I'm his dad forever. And I'm like, you can't do that. I think that's very, like, you cannot do that. Your kid comes first.
Yeah.
Their emotions and feelings, you can't just show up and be dad. He has a dad and a mom. And so I think as a birth parent, you got to respect that. I always, like, from the day I had him, this is mom and dad. And so there's just boundaries you have to respect on both sides.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I know you guys will maneuver through it because you have the relationship. Like, everything kind of boils down to that, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, respecting each other's roles that you played. And so, man, I know you're probably feeling like you're going to walk out of here with, like, a vulnerability hangover or something. Like, I mean,
I'm going to need a nap.
Yes. This was a lot to share. And you're a beautiful soul. And I am so sorry that you were treated that way. I'm so sorry. And I know that you're using it and you're going to continue to use it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, and it doesn't mean that you aren't going to have many more years of processing it and getting through it. And but I just want you to know that that I think highly of you, and that telling your story, I think, is a great avenue for healing. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Anything else you want to say? Oh, how can they reach you? I want to make sure that we say that. Like, I know your website's going to launch on your birthday.
Yes.
But let's say your website so we can make sure everybody knows.
So it'll be Beautifully Broken, Untold Stories.
.com. Okay. And then socials?
And then socials, Instagram is our main one right now, and it's just BB_Untold Stories.
Okay, BB Beautifully Broken _ but just the
BB _Untold Stories.
Untold Stories. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have Untold Stories. You're gonna try to do that every week. Have some sort of
so once a week I'll post a blog about me and just parenting or whatever, dealing with trauma. And then I have a long list of women that have came forward. Some anonymous, some want to be bold, and we set up photo shoots and they've got their picture on there and their whole story. Oh. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah,
it's hard.
It is. This is hard. This is hard today.
Yeah.
And we had some conversations, but
I think it's going to be great. It's going to be great. And a lot of people, I share one thing and they're like, oh, me too. And then they all want to share. And I think it's just really good to get it off your chest.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
you know what? You got it. You're using your broken. You know what? And that's powerful.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you guys for joining. I don't even have a lot of words for this. I would really love it if you would like and subscribe to the podcast, like it on YouTube, and let's see, what do? You subscribe on YouTube, and then also subscribe on your podcast platform. And man, just take a deep breath after this. And you know what it makes me want to do? It makes me want to love the people around me more, to be more embracing, and to be more welcoming, and to be more compassionate. So I'm going to move throughout the rest of my day with this story on my heart and love the people that are in my life better than I did yesterday. Have a great day.
Mama's well.
Yes, she is.